Welcome to another session. Today we're looking at access to funding. This is just the introductory video, and then we're going to go into details in terms of the process and the things that you need to make sure that you put in place when you're trying to access funding. And we know that access to funding is one of the main challenges faced by SMEs. If you look at any research, most research, reputable research on the causes of SME failure is access to funding. Access to funding is critical. Personally, I believe that as a country, we have sufficient funding available to support SMEs. And the challenge is probably maybe the distribution side of funding that is not distributed proportionally, and as well as the quality of SMEs that are coming through that requires funding. In terms of the system is not in sync between the funds that are available and the SMEs that are looking for funding. So there is a mismatch there, but I believe there's sufficient funding to support our SMEs. And access to funding causes many SMEs to fail because, one, sometimes when you get funding, or sometimes you don't get funding, you need funding to execute a project, and if you don't get the funding, then you can't execute the project, then that will result in your business failing, and as well as the reputation, because if someone gives you a project but you don't have access to funds to execute it, then the person who gave you the project obviously will be disappointed that you can't execute, and sometimes that can affect the performance of the organization that is giving you the opportunity. Access to funding, it causes many SMEs to fail from that angle. And the second one is sometimes you have access to funding but not sufficient. So sometimes you build an organization but you need access to funding for you to fly. Unfortunately, you might find that you only have unlimited funding and you fail before you can take off. So you run out of the runway in a way because you don't have sufficient capital to allow your business to take off. And you might find that the business is viable, but because you don't have sufficient money or you don't have capital to expand, then you find that your business fails. This happens generally. We find that when you apply for funding, you don't do a proper analysis of the required funding. You go to a funder, one, because sometimes when you are begging, you don't want to go ask for a lot of money. You just want maybe a portion that you believe it will make your business sustainable. Then once you start executing the project, or once you start implementing your business plan, then you realize that you might be needing additional funding. And we know that the processes, except if you have security, the processes of securing funding are very long. So if at your initial stage you don't make sure that you have sufficient funding to carry you through the ramp-up period, the learning curve, because as you're starting, there will be a learning curve where you're making mistakes, products are not coming out the way they're supposed to, or services are not executed the way they're supposed to be executed, and that costs money. And generally, project takes longer than most entrepreneurs predict or project, because sometimes we believe that everything will be in place immediately when we start, but there are certain things that you need to make sure that they're in place for your business to flourish. So those things sometimes they take long to fall into place. And then if your systems or your processes and your customers are not in place, it takes a lot of money for trial and error. You need to fund those trial and errors. So some businesses, they fail not because the business is not viable, it's because they don't have sufficient capital initially to make sure that the business is sustained during the loss period, and then once the business picks up, then it's no longer going to need funding. That runway sometimes we think should be shorter, and sometimes the funders themselves, they say make the runway shorter, but by the time you get to the end of the runway, you're still on the ground, you haven't taken off. Then the funders, they take long, the processes are long, most especially when you're looking at the funding that is based on viability, where they have to come to the due diligence and the approval processes take long. It's different when you have security, because if you have security, you just phone the bank within 2 days, 3 days, you get your funding. But if you're approaching risk funders, they have investment processes that they have in place. It will take them long for you to secure that funding. If you're applying for funding, make sure that you do your proper due diligence, you get your quotations, you do your research in terms of how long it's going to take you, and make a provision for earlier or the learnings, the lessons that you'll be learning and the learning curve that will happen. Any business, if you're starting a business, there will be a learning curve. It doesn't matter how experienced you are. If it's a new business, it will have its own challenges that will result in delaying your revenue generation. And if there's a delay in revenue generations, it means there is funding that is required. So you must just be careful in terms of when you're raising capital, to make sure that you raise sufficient capital, because you might fail, not because your business is not viable, but because you're running out of cash for your business to take off. That's the second reason. The first one is where business fail because they don't have funding. You can't access the funding. You have a viable project, you try to bootstrap it, and then you can't secure funding. The second one is you raise funding, but you don't raise sufficient funding to make sure that your business takes off. That's the second reason. And the third reason will be where you receive sufficient funding, but because of inexperience or ill discipline, you mismanage the funding. You find that you have sufficient, but you buy things that you don't necessarily need as a business. That as well is one of the main reasons, even within the access to funding portion. You have access to funding, but you buy things that you don't need. Later on, you run out of funding. Then when people ask you, why did you fail? Then the reason will generally be, I didn't have funding to fund my business or to fund the growth of my business. That's the three main reasons why many businesses fail. Many researchers indicate that access to funding is one of the major causes. It's always on the top, worst case, they're always on the top 5. But if it's not, it's always top 3 when you look at the research out there in terms of the causes of SMME failure. And we know that, depending on which research you read, they say about between 70 and 90% of businesses fail, of SMMEs, like startups, they fail within the first 3 years. Funding will be mainly one of them, or the key drivers for earlier failure. Yes, there are other things, like maybe you might find that you don't have a market fit, or there are maybe competition in the marketplace, or the market just, or the economy just weaken, and then your business fail. But one of the reasons that makes this 70 to 90% of SMMEs to fail is access to funding. I've just highlighted the reasons why access to funding is one of the main reasons why SMMEs fail. But now we're going to go into the summary of the things that you need to be careful of, or to make sure that you put in place when you go out and look for funding. As I said earlier, I believe there's enough funding in the country to fund SMMEs. And the challenge is, you might find that there is mismatch in terms of the funders, their mandate, and the SMMEs, the quality and their objectives. For you as an SMME to access funds, you need to define your value proposition properly. You need to look at what you want to achieve as a business, obviously from your business plan perspective, and then how you're going to achieve it and all that, and look at the funds that are available out there. Which funders are you going to approach? Which you want in terms of the sector, you meet their mandate, but 2, in terms of the impact, because funders have their own mandates. There are certain things that they want to achieve, and then you need to make sure that you meet the funders' mandate. That's the first thing. Once you have identified the funders that you meet the mandate, then what you need to do is now refine your value proposition so that it can talk to the funders' impact that they are looking for. Remember, funders are looking to achieve a certain strategic objective. There's a certain one can be financial, but in addition to the financial objectives of the funders, now those are the commercial funders. They have financial returns that they want to achieve, and in addition to the financial returns that they want to achieve, they have call it an impact that they want to make. Certain funders are funding certain sectors because they want to make a difference in those sectors. So what you need to do as an entrepreneur is to align your value proposition or your impact with that of the funder that want to approach for funding. Once you align those two, that's the first step that you need to take, so that even when you approach them, your value proposition must talk to the impact that they want to achieve, their strategic objective, their mandate. The first thing is you look at the funders that have more or less similar, they're in the sector that you are in, but they also have the similar mandate, or they want to achieve the same impact or similar impact as yours. That's the first thing that you need to make sure that you plan around when you're developing a business plan. What is the impact that you want to achieve? What is the difference that you want to make? And which funders will support that initiative? First, for you to access the funds, then that's the high level now, the impact. The sector that you are in, the impact that you want to achieve, or the value proposition that you want to achieve. And then you look at the funders. One, you look at their mandate. One, the sector, they fund in the sector that you are in. Two, do they want to fund businesses that are in your space? They want to achieve what you want to achieve. So you might find that you want to be small, to start small. You want 100,000, but you find the funders' minimum requirement is 2 million. One, you might be in the same sector. You might be doing your value proposition might be talking to the funder, but you might find that maybe the threshold in terms of the ticket size of your transaction, it doesn't meet their funding requirement or their mandate. Once you have matched the mandate, that's the beginning of the process of accessing funds. So you need to find the funders or the investors that are looking into your sector in terms of investment opportunities, and their value proposition or their mandate in terms of what they want to achieve, the impact that they want to have. And then you match your impact or your value proposition to that, so that on high level, you and the funder are matching. There might be different funders, and one, they might be in private sector or commercial. Others might be DFIs. Maybe you might look at grants and different funding instruments that your industry is, the method that your industry is funding. But we have a video on that in terms of different funding mechanisms and tools and structures. To watch that video, it will show you in terms of the different funding structures that you can do as an SME. Now, that's on the impact, the value proposition. It's important. Make sure that your value proposition and the funder's value proposition or funder's mandate are matching. That's one of the key things that you need to make sure that you don't waste your time approaching a lot of funders. There's information out there. You have resources on Super Deal Maker that will show you which investors are looking in terms of the transactions that they are looking for. So you can use our resources, but as well you can search on the internet in terms of the sector that your amount of value or the investment amount, and you look at the impact that you want to achieve. Some are focused on like your NEFs, focus on black or PE transactions, or majority black owned transaction. CIFA is more looking at the small businesses, and which is strong on maybe on your orders and your franchise type of businesses. Then you have your IDC, who are focused maybe on manufacturing and agro processing. Then you have your DBSA that's looking at infrastructure type of investment. You have land bank, which is looking at farming and agro processing type of transactions. And you have your commercial banks, which are looking at anything that, as long as you can prove that there is a revenue stream and you have security, mainly they are funding based on security. Those are the things that you need to look at. the funding, the value of the amount that you're looking for funding, and you look at the relevant institution that can help you get to that value. And secondly, after you looked at the value, you look at their mandate. What are they allowed to fund, or what is their approach when it comes to certain industries? Then once you match that, then we're gonna go into details now, how you put together your business plan so that you can access funding. It's very, very important, because you might see to say, no, there's no funding available out there. It might be because you're not doing your research in terms of finding the relevant funders or investors that are looking, or they're interested in your sector, and they're interested in the investment amount that you're looking for, because sometimes we might be below the mandate or above. So make sure that you understand your funding landscape. The next level that you need to look at is on the outcome. When you're looking for funding, or when you're looking to access funding, you must have clear outcomes. What do you want to achieve as a business? The outcomes, one, they must be, they call it SMART, which are, they must be simple, they must be measurable, they must be time specific, they must be achievable. So those are the things that you need to look at when you're trying to access funding. Have clearly outlined outcome in terms of your business, in terms of looking at your business plan. What do you want to achieve as a business? What is your vision? What is your mission? What are your goals? Because that becomes important. Your vision, mission, your objectives are very, very important, because that now shows the funder what are you trying to achieve. Should we support this? What are the expectations? So those must be clear, so that the funder is able to motivate why they should give you the funding rather than giving the next person. And we have a video on the objectives, mission and vision. Watch that video. We go into details in terms of how you set your mission, how do you develop your vision, and you set goals. It's very, very important that you need to know what are the outcomes you want to achieve, or the outcome. If it's one big outcome, that can be broken down into different goals, but what is the outcome that you want to achieve as a business? Because remember, the funding institutions, they are generally, yes, you have angel investors that have their own money, they invest their own money, but most of the funding institutions that you can approach, people who are working there are mostly employees. They have to motivate your transaction to their superiors. So for people to go motivate, there must be clear outcomes that this business is planning to achieve 1, 2, 3, 4, which are clear, and they must be achievable, and then they must have a time frame. They must be specific as possible, and they must be measurable, so that the funder will be able to hold you accountable. But achievable is very important, because if you go to the funder and say you want to set up a 100 billion mining business, you don't have the mineral rights, you don't have the skills, you don't have the infrastructure, then even the funder will just look at you and laugh, because they can see that the goals that you have set in your business plan are not achievable. It's very important that if you want to access funding, make sure that the outcome that you want to achieve, or the outcomes that you want to achieve for your business, are very clear, achievable, they can be measured, and you have the technical know-how, and you have the market that will enable you to achieve those outcomes. Because you might want to sell, I don't know, 1 billion burgers, but to only find that there is no market in South Africa, for argument's sake. We only have 60 million population. So likely to sell 1 billion burgers a day. What you need to do when you're developing the outcomes must be very, very specific. They must be practical, they must be achievable, they must be measurable, and they must have time allocated to them. To say, when you're doing your business plan, you want to achieve a turnover of 100,000 per month. Obviously, okay, not obviously, but most of the time, you might not achieve 100,000 when you start. So your business will generally ramp up. You might start achieving it in your 3rd month or 16th month, depending on the type of business that you're setting. When you're setting your goals, you must have clear outcomes that you want to achieve. Even when you're approaching the funder, you must have clear outcomes to say, look, I need so much funding to achieve this and this and this. So that is clear, and the funder can make a decision if they support or they believe in your vision or mission or goals. The second one is that you need to make sure that you have it covered and you do your proper research, is the outcomes that your business wants to achieve, so that the funder is comfortable on the things that you want to achieve. Now we're going into the third one, which is the building block, and I'm just summarizing the approach that you should take when you're looking for funding. The third one now is the output. You have the impact. We spoke about the impact that you want to make as an entrepreneur or as the enterprise. Then you have the outcome that you want to achieve, the goals that you want to achieve. But for you to achieve those goals, what are you going to produce? Those are the outcomes. Let's say your goal is to achieve 100,000 turnover per month on average. And then, but what are you going to produce? What are you supposed to produce for you to be able to achieve that turnover? If you are in services like in training, like RMK is, to achieve a turnover of 100,000 a month, probably we need about 100 learners, maybe on full qualifications. That now the output. It means in a year, the output will be 100 qualifications, full qualifications. We know that we produce 100 qualifications, then we'll be able to achieve our monthly turnover of 100,000. I'm just giving an example. On your business plan, when you're doing your planning, when you're doing your strategy, when you're developing the business plan, before you even approach the relevant funding institution to access the funding, look at the output. If you have the outcome that you want to achieve, what are you supposed to, how much are you supposed to be producing of what? Let's say if you are in manufacturing, there might be a certain number of books that you need to produce for you to reach the outcome that you planning to achieve. And then that outcome is supposed to have the impact. So remember, we started with the impact and then we had the outcome. But now we are on the output. Now it's on the production. How many products are you supposed to produce to achieve your objective? Remember, sometimes you have the outcome, but when you look at the output, to say, let's say for RMK to achieve 100,000 average turnover per month, we need 100 full qualification students. Is that practical now? Can we produce 100 students per annum so that we achieve our average monthly turnover? You might find that we don't have the resources, and then that's when the funding or the amount of funding that you need comes into play. For me to achieve this, I need to have 100 students in the classroom. So to have 100 students, let's say each classroom is supposed to have 20, so that means I need 5 classrooms. When I'm looking for funding, then I say the funder, I need to build 5 classrooms. Then I need to cost those classrooms, to say for the classrooms I need so much. Let's say it's 6,000 rand per square meter to build. Let's say it's 6,000 per square meter. Finishes training center. So if I need 5 classrooms, then at 6,000 per square meter, let's say maybe there are, I don't know, let's say it's 100 square meters of a training center. Then it's 5,000 per square meter. Then I need 500,000 to build the classes. Because I'm driven by the output that I need to produce. But if you want to produce maybe college book, there's so many printers for you to achieve this objective. Now, you know, if you need so many printers, then you go and get quotations, wherever you get competitive quotations, and then you determine how much are you going to need for you to fund your operation. So when you're trying to access funding, you look at one, the impact, which we spoke about. You look at the outcome. What do you want to achieve in terms of the objectives? And then you look at the outputs. The outputs are the ones that will guide you in terms of the amount of funding that you need. If you have to produce a certain number of products, you need a specific machine with a certain number of quantities that it can produce per hour, per minute. Or look at what you want to achieve and then the output of that machine. And then the output of the machine will guide you in terms of even the building infrastructure. What size, maybe you might need a factory of a certain size. Number of employees that you need to employ for you to achieve that output. And then in terms of the location, how you're going to distribute the product that you're producing. How far are your customers? So the output is very, very important because it becomes the cornerstone to guide you on the amount that you need to budget for when you're looking for funding. One other important thing is, once you know the output, right, then you'll know how much turnover you can achieve, right? And then once you know the turnover that you can achieve, funding that you need, will you be able to repay the funding that you're looking for based on the output that you want to achieve? Let's say I want to print maybe 10 books per month. Then I get a printer that can print a book, maybe it's 100,000. But you find that the output that I'm producing is 10 books and I'm selling my books for 100 Rand. It's 1,000 Rand. Then buying a printer, let's say printer is 100,000 to print the books. So it shows that now the output of 1,000 Rand per month, even before I take out the cost. Now I'm buying a printer which is 100,000. How long is it going to take for the business to repay back that loan? Remember, if I'm making only 1,000 Rand a month, and let's say the interest rate is at 10% or 12%, it means the 100,000 will attract about a 12,000 Rand interest. And I'm making 1,000 Rand per month. It means that I will only be paying interest. I won't be even touching the capital amount if I'm achieving a turnover of 1,000 Rand. The output and the outcome should guide you in terms of the amount that the business can afford to pay back. Even if you are applying for a grant, it must still be economical. Even if funder doesn't want you to repay back the loan, or you secure an equity funding, but it must still be economical, the amount, the money that you're looking for. Because sometimes you find that the entrepreneurs, here's the grants, the government is opening up the grants, and they just apply, I need 10 million. But you look at the output from that 10 million, the investment that they're going to make. You find that the output, it doesn't make economical sense. Despite the fact that this is a grant. The grant, it doesn't mean you just have to waste the money. Even if whoever is funding you, they give you a grant, they still want you to run an economically positive enterprise. So the output becomes very, very, very important. Look at the funding in isolation. You look at the funding that you need in relation to the output or the production that you'll be able to deliver. Then, once you look at that, obviously you're going to do the costing that we're going to go into a little bit later to see how much does it cost you to produce a certain product and how much profit are you going to make. Then from that profit, you look at, will you be able to repay back this money? If it's a loan. If it's a grant, is it economical? Because you still need to be able to recover the investment that you've put in, unless you are a non-profit organization or you are a charity. Then that is not expected. But if you're running a profitable or a commercial business, even if you receive a grant, that grant investment must still be able to generate you sufficient revenue for you to return that money. Even if you don't have to return it, but you must be able to generate enough profit for you to make up the money that or whoever has funded you has invested in your business. So the output is very, very, very important. Even if it's a grant, it's an investment. Because I know I'm emphasizing the grant portion because I know government's got a lot of grants that it gives to SMEs, but SMEs, they forget that is also an investment. It might be a grant, but it's an investment that if you submit a proposal, it must be a proposal that will achieve a positive return on that investment. Output it's important. So first you look at the impact. You look at the funders that they want to achieve the same impact as you, then you approach those funders. The outcome must be clear so that whoever is looking at your transaction will be able to motivate it for investment. And then the output is important to see, to make sure that you will be able to produce the quantities that will enable your business to be economically positive, is able to make a return on the investment that you're looking for. Don't try and access money for the sake of accessing money. It's a grant. You just apply because it's a grant. Your business must be one, economical. You must know what you're going to produce, what you want to achieve, and the impact that you want to make in the community, or in terms of contributing towards the economy, or building generational wealth for your family. So depending on what you want to achieve, there must still be an impact that your business must have. It must have the outcome that you're planning to achieve, and there must be output, the things that you need to produce for you to achieve a return on investment for the money that you're looking for. You don't just access funds for the sake of accessing funds because the funds are available. You access funds because you have a plan on how you're going to build an economically viable business. Going into the fourth one, that we need to make sure that you have it covered as an entrepreneur. We looked at the impact that your business is going to achieve or is going to have. Look at the outcome, the objectives, the mission, the vision that your business wants to achieve. We looked at the output, things that your business is going to produce for it to generate the revenue, meaning the products and all that. For you to produce certain product or services, there must be activities. Activities is where now the budgeting comes into play, to say these are the activities that we need to achieve. If you're in training, there are certain activities that they need to be performed for you to facilitate, assess, moderate, and certificate the learners. One, there must be an admission process. You're going to need to set up an administration process, which you need to budget for. Two, you need to hire professionals to facilitate the training. And three, you need to have the infrastructure, the lecture room, the training room. Four, you need to have the material that you need to produce, the learning material. Five, then after the facilitation, there will be assessments. So you need professionals in terms of assessors that needs to assess, and then the portfolio of evidence needs to be moderated internally. And once it's moderated internally, then you need to submit it to the relevant center for external moderation. Remember, these are the activities to get the learner certificated. In terms of those activities, each activity require working capital. Remember, we spoke about the capex part, where you look at the output, you look at the infrastructure that you're looking for you to achieve outputs. When you're looking at the activities, it's where now you're looking at, in funding terms, it's working capital. Generally, when you're applying for funding, you're going to apply for what they call it capex. It's capital expenditure, where you're going to buy physical assets or equipment that you're going to use in your operation for a longer period of time. Like training, I spoke about the building. You need to make sure that you have the building infrastructure and you have the printers. Those are the capex part of a training organization. Then there are activities that needs to be performed for you to deliver your service. As I said, for training, you need to, one, it's the admission process. Obviously, there must be someone who's advertising, admitting learners. It's a cost. It's a facilitation process. It's a cost. Facilitation process comes with printing of materials and all that, and the facilitator. And there is an assessment process where you need to pay assessors to assess the portfolio of evidence, and then you need to get CETA or whoever to come to the moderation, or if it's GSTO, you send your learners to an exam center for them to write the exams, and then you need to make sure that they receive their certificates. So those are the activities in the business. When you're trying to get access to funding, you must understand those activities in your business so that you can cost in terms of how much working capital are you going to apply for. Working capital is the opposite of capex. basically is the funding that you need to run your business, to pay for activities within the business. It might include buying of, now giving the example of the training, printing and buying of the paper, material and all that. If we are renting, including rental. And then, as I mentioned, all these activities have people who will be executing them. We need to be paying for their salaries. That money that is used in that process is called working capital. So when you're trying to access funding, make sure that you've budgeted for working capital for those activities that will be taking place for you to produce the services that you're producing. And it's the similar thing, if you are manufacturing something or you are producing certain product, you're going to need working capital, one, to buy raw material, to pay rental if you are renting, to pay electricity and lights, to pay employees. And then once you sell, sometimes you're not selling on cash, they pay you after 30 days or so. Then for the operation, you need working capital to carry you throughout the process until you receive the revenue. You don't just start now, receive the revenue tomorrow. No, you need to execute each process, produce the product, transport it, sell it to the customer. Customer pays you later. But you need money for that process. So that is called working capital. So just be careful when you're looking for funding. Don't only focus on the capital assets that you need, the productive assets. Look at the working capital that you need. But for you to come up with the appropriate or correct figure when it comes to working capital, you need to analyze your activities. The activities that you need for you to produce whatever the product or service that you're offering. So you look at those activities, you do a practical calculation to make sure that the working capital that you need is sufficient. How many months of working capital should you apply for when you're trying to access funding? That depends from business to business. You find that certain businesses, they can convert their working capital quicker. If you are running a fast food, sometimes you don't have to buy a lot of stuff. You just buy, and then you produce on the day, you sell. Tomorrow you go back to the market or to your suppliers, you buy, you sell. So in terms of that, to turn the working capital into cash, it doesn't take long. But sometimes certain businesses, you need to hold stock. If you are a retailer, how long does it take for people to buy your goods in your store? Yes, they might be buying a tin fish every day, but sometimes you need to buy 100 tin fish, a pack of 100 tin fish, so that you can be able to sell over a period of a month. That now is sitting on the stock. So your stock will only be sold after 30 days, but you need to invest in that stock. So that is what is called working capital. So when you access funding, make sure that you understand what is your working capital and you understand your activities so that you can cost your working capital appropriately. Because if you don't do that, you might be underfunded. And as I said earlier on the introduction, is to say that if you are underfunded, sometimes it's difficult to come out of it. That might be the end of it. You might get an opportunity to be funded, but because you're trying to impress the funder to say you need a small amount, then you don't look at your activities in detail. Then you under budget your working capital. You have the assets, you bought maybe nice Rolls-Royce assets, but you don't have the working capital to get them to work. Your business might end up failing and you might end up being listed or whatever, being liquidated because you didn't budget for the working capital. In business is a challenging process. You need to make sure that you prepare and you do your research, and everything is supported by understanding of the activities that this business needs to execute. Because without understanding those activities, you might make mistakes. You might access the funding and then run out of working capital, run out of money to operate the machines. And that's as good as failing. And believe me, there are a lot of projects that have failed because they've been underfunded. It's like the land and redistribution project. We have a lot of those where government bought farms from the previously white owners, and they gave the project back to the communities that owned the project, or they own the land. As they buy them, they pay the white farmer the money that is due to the white farmer. They underfund the working capital for the project. If the project is underfunded, it ends up not producing the quality product that it's supposed to produce, and people are trying to get the little cent that they can get out of the project. So now you're just now in trouble because you're trying to spend a minimum amount to run the operation. You end up making what do you call it, shortcuts, not buying the quality that you're supposed to buy, not marketing the product the way you're supposed to market it, not packaging the way you're supposed to, or quality packaging, paying the employees the amount that they're supposed to be paid. And that is recipe for disaster. So underfunding project is one of the main reasons that businesses fail, and is classified under access to funding, because you don't have access to sufficient working capital for you to be able to execute the strategy of the organization. Now, on this one, this third one, the topic that we are on now is called activities. You need to understand activities. Each and every activity within your organization, be able to cost it so that you know that how much it's going to cost you. Look, I know I'm focusing on access to funding, and I'm talking about the loans and all that. Even if you are funding the project yourself, you might under budget or underestimate how much you actually need to run a project, because you didn't analyze the activities that your business will conduct. So do proper research, understand your sector, make sure that all the activities are analyzed and they are costed, so that once you know how much it's going to cost in terms of the capital expenses and in terms of the working capital, then when you approach the funder, it will show that you understood what you're talking about. You'll be able to motivate the amount of funding that is required. That's on the fourth element that you need to make sure overall you understand is activities. So we started with the impact. Understand the impact or the value proposition that your business wants to achieve, and then match it with that of the funders. Understand the outcome, your mission, vision. They must be clear as daylight in terms of what the outcomes you want to achieve. And then the output, what are you going to produce? What type of products? In which sizes are you going to produce? Those are the outputs. And those outputs must generate you enough revenue to make your business economically viable. That's the third one. And the fourth one, you need to make sure that you understand the activities that goes into your business. Each and every activity must be analyzed, must be costed, so that you know how much working capital you need. The last one that we'll go into is the inputs that are required when you're trying to access funding. There are different inputs that are required. We spoke about the activity. We just finished speaking about the activities. The activities will guide the inputs that you need. Raw material. Make sure that you have access to the inputs, and you know how much they're going to cost you. Because yes, I might be setting up a training center here, maybe to train people on, I don't know, astrology, on some qualification that I might not be able to get the facilitators for that course. So those are one of the inputs that I'm gonna need in training, is a facilitator. But what I need to do is to analyze the market. Will I be able to get the facilitators to achieve this? Will I have learners who are interested in achieving this qualification? Because now they become one of the inputs, because ultimately I want to achieve a certain turnover per month. But one, I need the learners. will the learners be interested in what I'm offering? 2, in terms of the inputs, I need facilitators. Will I have skilled facilitators to execute the qualification? Printing material, will I have access to enough paper? And at what cost? Because the inputs are the ones that are driving the cost now. How much will it cost me to print paper for 100 students for 100 qualifications? How many facilitators am I going to need? How many classrooms will they be required? Those are the type of input. How many chairs? How many if I'm providing lunch? So those are inputs into the activities. Remember, we spoke about the activities that you need to do, but those activities are made up of different inputs. So admission is made up of inputs will be paper, telephone, and the receptionist, the whatever the resources that I might need to recruit. So activity requires certain inputs. Once I've recruited, then I need to facilitate. To facilitate, I need printing material. Those are the inputs. I need to find where they're selling paper. Oh, I can manufacture paper. I have the infrastructure. Then I need the facilitator. Then once facilitated, then I need to assess. The input there is the assess. I need to pay a fee to assessor to do the assessment. And then I need to invite the sitter to come through. That's time now. It might not be a physical money that I need to spend, but obviously I need to print documents for them to come and do the external moderation. These are other inputs that are required. When you approach an institution for funding or to access money, you need to know all the inputs that you're gonna need for you to achieve the impact, for you to achieve the outputs, for you to perform the activities. You need inputs. So you need to know all the inputs that will be required for your business to be successful. And those inputs need to be costed. The costing of the activity will be a total of all the inputs that are required to perform that activity. Then you've got the costing of that activity. Then you'll be able to cost the outputs. Because sometimes if you don't know the inputs, you might not even know how much does it cost you to produce, let's say, one book. Because if you don't do that analysis of the inputs, what inputs do I need to produce it? How much does it cost me? You might think you are profitable to only find out that you are not. Actually, I was dealing with one bakery and I asked them, how much is the bread? They are doing this Fakumoya bread. And they told me they're selling it, I think it's what, 850. Then I asked them, how much does it cost you to produce it? They didn't know. They said, no, we buy flour, we buy oil, we buy this. But I'm saying, how did you come to the 850 price? They said it's because the market is selling at 850. But how do you know that you are not making a loss? They didn't know if they're making a loss or not. And obviously, okay, not obviously, but I was there to assist them because they were struggling. They were not growing. They were receiving grants. They were receiving support because they were based in a rural area. They're receiving all this, but the business was not economical because they didn't know the inputs that they are putting in. You need to know if it's a flour. For you to produce a loaf of bread, you need to be able to break it down into each input that you need to produce that bread so that you have a cost per bread, so that you can understand why are you charging a certain price. It must make sense. You must charge a price that makes sense. But if you don't have the research, or if you don't understand the inputs, the cost of those inputs, and then how many, the quantities that you're going to need, you'll end up failing as an entrepreneur. The inputs, they are the foundation of any business. You need to know all the inputs that you need. One, can you have access to inputs? Those inputs, because sometimes you want to produce bricks, but you don't have access to sand, or you have to buy sand from far, and that will impact on the profitability of your business. You find that there's no sand, you don't have sand locally. Then if you don't have sand locally, you need to import it from another community or another town. Then that will cost you more. Then it will make your business not profitable. First, I know I'm coming last, but or lastly, you need to make sure that you understand the inputs. But the inputs are first in a way, because even though I'm coming from the top to say inputs are last in terms of the analysis, but they are the key drivers for you to achieve the top, which is the impact that you want to achieve, or the impact that your organization want to achieve. So you need to be able to determine the inputs that are required and cost them, so that you know how much it's going to cost you to achieve the impact. And the funders will, believe me, when they do due diligence, they go to the inputs. You say you're going to achieve this. For you to achieve this, you need to produce so many units. For you to produce so many units, you need so many activities. This activity needs so many inputs, and these inputs will cost you so much. So from the inputs going up, it might show that your business is not financially sustainable, and you struggle to access funding because you haven't done your homework, when you didn't look at your inputs the way you're supposed to have looked at them. You didn't analyze them the way you're supposed to have analyzed them. You don't know what is your unit cost. How much does it cost you to produce 1 unit of a product that you're providing? Or even if it's a service, you need to know. If it's hours you charge per hour, you need to know how much does it cost you per hour for you to produce that service, or to provide that service. You know what you're charging the client or your customers, it covers your input cost. So inputs are very, very, very important. That's the summary. If you're looking to access funding, you need to have an overall look. You need to take an overall look at your business. Know what impact you want to make. Match it with the funder. What outcomes do you want to achieve? Vision, mission, so that whoever is helping you to raise the funding, he should be able to motivate your business or you accessing the funds. The outputs, activities that you need to produce. You need to know how many quantities of what you need to produce, and you need to know where you can produce them, the size of infrastructure that you need, the assets that you need for you to produce those numbers. And fourth, you need to know the activities that you need to perform for you to produce the outputs that you're looking for, because you need to cost those activities. And last, you need to know all the inputs that you're gonna need for you to run a successful, profitable business. I thank you.